Hello and welcome to Office Hours. This is a show where we answer your media and virtual production questions with our panel. Our first hour is dedicated to that. Our second hour is usually something we want to focus on and pay more attention to. Either it's a guest or a topic. Saturdays are our education hour. So we have John Snyder with us today talking about PowerPoint animation. Looking forward to that. But we'll get right into your questions. So Ken, what do we have?
Hello, Josh. Well, we have a bunch today. The first one comes from Michael Andreas in Olathe, Kansas. And Michael says, yesterday, during extra Zoom ISO testing, my 360 link camera zoomed to maximum framing and did not respond to the control app. Proper framing checked beforehand, proper operation restored after leaving ISO breakout room. Any ideas?
Alex?
Yeah, as far as the operation goes, I don't know why it stopped doing operation, but what I already have done with the link is already seen if anything requests it, there's a chance, and it's not 100%, that it's going to go to that maximum framing. So that means zooming all the way out. If you were watching the Michael Krasny show, you might have seen it do it a couple of times, and that was not Zoom asking for it. That was Memo Live asking for it. So it was asking for that, and suddenly it would pop out to the wide. Here's the thing that I haven't figured out yet is that it doesn't do it all the time. So there's something about the request. Yeah, it happened like 3 times during the show, but not every time, because I kept on going, okay, now if I go back again, and I had a preset, so all I had to do is tap a button and it would just go right back to where it was. So that the way that I've managed it so far is that what it is, it doesn't happen randomly. It happens when you cut to it, which is what I was doing yesterday. And so I don't have an answer for you, but I can tell you it's not just Zoom. It's not Zoom making a request. It is a video application making a request for it, and we're still trying to figure out what causes that. It's a great camera, and this is not the only camera that does this. Many cameras that have variable zoom will react this way in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I concur with that, Alex. Sometimes when we move our second-hour guests into the show, if they're on a Logitech or something else, it's the way that the scaling, sometimes it takes a piece of the sensor, and so that sometimes they scale actually like a 1080, 19 by 1080 piece of the image a lot of times. So Logitechs will do that. We've seen it here on the link. It is a bit of a glitch, and I think one reason why our community sees this more so is that not many people have 1080p zooms. So people come in here and they're like, what? I've never seen my camera do that before. So let's go to our next question.
Next question comes from James from Guy Cochran in Seattle, USA. And Guy says, the largest remote video production company in the world, 1,000 productions per week. Just who are these guys? And he gives us a YouTube link.
I did not get a chance to check out that link. Alex?
Yeah, I looked at the link. so what I thought was interesting is, there's a couple interesting things looking at that link before the show. Number one is, it's a great business model. What they did is they went to a lot of folks and they said, well, let us install the cameras and run the whole thing for you. You're basically, a bunch of us have talked about the potential of studio as a service for the last 5 years, and that you can just give everybody the tech and run it remotely, or maybe have a technician or people that you've trained on site, might be volunteers if it's a house of worship or other things like that. And so this is something that a lot of us have talked about. It looks like they're executing on it. And so they are, controlling the cameras. They're, it looks like they're cutting in the cloud, to make all of that work, or they may be cutting remotely and then streaming, but they're putting that together. What I thought was interesting is they bought evidently a lot of BGH1s from Panasonic and then they got rid of them because they couldn't power cycle them. And I have to admit that I was like, oh, this is really, really cool. And when they said that was the problem, I was like, well, there's a lot of solutions for that. like I was a little like, there's so many solutions for power cycling a device that's outside of the device. The fact that that's why they bought a whole bunch of cameras and turned them back. I have to admit, I felt like, I just don't understand. I just was completely in does not compute mode after the, that they seemed very technical. And then there was something that they couldn't do that I couldn't figure out why that was a glitch. So it made me, I was like, well, I don't understand. there's something about that doesn't make any sense. Good.
Guy, don't suppose they returned him back to you, did they?
No, that wasn't my customer, but I just found the video extremely intriguing. When I heard that number, it was just shocking because they popped up on our radar a few months ago and we just kind of loosely looked at it and blew it off. But then to hear the number, I mean, 1,000 productions a week, that's pretty crazy. So you think of how many operators is that, and are they virtual or where are they? So it just opened up a lot of questions as to like, how could we do something like this with our group? Because it looks like they ship a PTZ camera that's 4K, and then they're doing something like what we've seen with AJ or Data Video, where you could extract like 720p zoom ins or boxes out of that. So it's pretty intriguing because at my church, we could totally use it. There's been many times where I'm like, man, if I just had my Epiphan Pearl over at the house of worship, I could just totally just do this in my bathrobe from home. Like, why am I here? The only thing that I would like is PTZ control. So like if Epiphan would give me VISC over IP control, then I could actually move the camera around. Or I do have one of these boxes, the IP global boxes, but then that's my hardware at their place. But I mean, it just seems like we're on to something, and they got $30 million in funding from somebody. So I did a little more prying into this, and there's a TechCrunch article. So they got 3 million of funding, and then they got 30 million, and look on their LinkedIn, and they're laying off some people. So it's like it went up, and then where are they now?
The real challenge with that business model that I saw reading it is that they are not building events; they're covering events, and I say that very carefully because there was a question yesterday about losing work and so on and so forth. When you do something that's easily scalable, it is also easily, competable. Someone can come in and compete with you aggressively because so you really have to figure out what you're doing that is going to create a difficulty. That might be customer service, but that's a really hard one to win at. It really has to be something, like what I really focus on, and I don't do, 1,000 events a week. I mean, I think that at our height, PixelCore was doing about 5 events a week, so it was, but the difference was they were complex. Every single one of them was built and bespoke for that client. There was no churn. There was no I'm just going to turn this over. And I think that is, and the disadvantage of that is it's very hard to scale. The advantage of it is that if a client went somewhere else, the cliff just dropped off, because every show was slightly better than the last one, and because we were constantly evolving. But I always feel like being technically better at it and customizing it for the client. And I think I feel like that's the future, is us figuring out ways to build these great things. We do have to have something that's repeatable. And that's where, what we're doing in office hours. Again, I'm not saying that the office hour system is the future, but it is us figuring that out. And I think Guy's onto something where this is going to be a huge business. Like, it's going to be massive, and it's going to get past covering physical events. It's going to be just like this business model really looks like it's based around, we'll put a camera in the back of your room and we'll cover an event for you, and get video out to people. But that's really, if you look at the average view time of a single camera in the back of a room, it is brutal. like it is a brutal, like, you just don't, you're like, oh, that's not even, it's, if it's really inexpensive, it's worth doing for accessibility for your parishioners or accessibility for a class for people who are desperate. But it's like giving, barely editable food to people who are starving. Like that. That's what it's good for. It's not a steak. It's not and so I think that what we have the opportunity to do, and I think what we do in office hours is pretty high end. I mean, I get comments now from folks in the industry that know what they're looking at, and they're kind of amazed at what we're doing here. And we're doing something that eventually will be scalable, and eventually figured out. So I think Guy's completely right that there's something here, and I think that we're going to see it continue to unwrap, over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I've seen something like what you said, Alex, about what your offer is. I know of companies that started with the pandemic with a program that was really hard to handle, like Adobe Connect, where you had to guide the participants through and all the gotchas, but it had all these power and different features. What happened, I know, with a lot of those companies is that they actually switched to Zoom, not because Zoom had all of the customizable features of Adobe Connect, but because of its frictionless entry. But if you don't go to custom production, once you switch to that, then people find that they can produce their own Zoom meetings because it's so low friction.
Yeah, and I think that there is, I mean, the possibilities right now. We were doing tests yesterday. A lot of people here were kind enough to jump into after hours and jump into the thing. And so, we were doing some tests, and we're going to talk about it more on Monday. But, what's possible with ZoomISO right now of getting, 8 outputs, 16 outputs seamlessly out of Zoom, to put things together. You can put together really complex shows, but I think we want to keep on looking at how we build complex, inspiring shows and make that scalable. And I think that that's totally possible with a group of people like what we have. That's what makes what office hours members different, is that we can build something. We're not going out and getting just some random operators that are going to do, pan and scan inside of a screen. That's what they're doing. It's just, I'm sure that they go through a 4-hour training and then they, go here, one does this, go that. I think that what we have is something that we're building. We could be building a network of folks that can build something that is, inspiring every time. And part of it is getting out of the physical environment where you have to put the camera in the back. We're all of us here, head and shoulder. We can see what people are talking about. We can look at those things. I think that that's a much more compelling way to deliver content most of the time.
Yeah, and I think what I like about something like a Zoom contribution custom workflow is that a lot of these companies were trying to eat Zoom's lunch by doing their own event management. So like your Bizibos, your Hop-ins, they were web-based platforms, which gave people a different look than that, boxes and squares and gallery views and such. But they came at the expense of, still being under the thumb of that platform. If you had a bug or something, it was up to you finding that bespoke platform to fix it. Or if you wanted a feature update, it was under them. You were still producing underneath what they could provide as a company.
I think that fundamentally, and I think Zoom has this problem as well, is that people keep on building events to reproduce physical experiences virtually. And until we give that up, until we start building something that's a virtual event for virtual attendees, we're still going to have, situations where it just doesn't make, it feels uncompelling because you're basically putting, new wine into old wineskins.
Yeah, absolutely. But love the opportunity of the custom workflow from Zoom, because really the sky's the limit as far as what we can do. People can be, they can roll their own solutions. They could use their own second screen options to add on to it with that nice, easy introduction, or they can do, something novel, whereas, you really have creativity really as you're selling there. But let's go to our next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes to us about an article he read recently in a magazine that says Starlink is quietly introducing data caps for U.S. users. And he wants to know, what does the panel think about that? And asks, could it make remote production with Starlink harder?
Do we know what those data caps are, Alex?
I don't know what the data caps are. I don't think it's going to make it any harder. It's already hard with Starlink. I wouldn't do, I would use it as a backup. I don't know if I would use Starlink as a main production pipeline for something. Now, the Pro version may be a little bit better, but my experience so far as an owner of a Starlink is that it's not, I wouldn't use it in production. I still use it as a backup, and I'm still experimenting with it and using it in different places, but it is not, in my opinion, production ready. I think that if you were going to be doing it professionally, you'd probably get the professional level of it, which probably doesn't have those data caps. I think the data caps are really coming with the smaller versions. Then, if you're paying $2,500 for the dish, which I don't have, I think they probably give you a little bit more room.
Now, what if they double, triple the constellation size? Do you feel better about it then?
Yeah. I think Starlink could be a great future for production. I just don't think it's there. It's just not there yet. So, and something that what I would love to see is something that's a Starlink bonded with 5G, is an interesting solution. That's, and you can do that now. Like, you can bond them together. You can have contribution, whether you're using a PepWave or you're using Starlink to back up a live view. We've used KA dishes in the past, which, are not as robust as Starlink, but still there. On a sunny day, without a lot of clouds, the KA as an added feature guarantees our feed regardless of the cell coverage. So, and we just do that as an Ethernet into a live view.
All right, let's go to our next question.
Paul Alhus from Austin, Texas asks, what's the Zoom meeting experience like on Metaquest Pro? Yes, it already exists. Your actual thoughts on where metaverse, VR, and AR are right now. And he gives us a YouTube link.
Go ahead, Alex.
I think it's a really bad idea to put something up against your eyes for 2 hours straight frequently. Like, I don't think that they have figured out all the math. And I can, I think that it's a concern. Like, so I think that using it as an experience at times, I think is a good idea, is compelling, and you can see the future. But I think that I would let this one. I think that there's just potentially 10 years from now, a lot of people that are having vision issues. You're doing something that, we already know that the screens are not super good for our eyes. And then we're going to now put them right up in front of them. So I have a little bit of concern about trying to do Zoom meetings or long events inside of these frequently. And I know that I'm being a little bit of a Luddite on it, but it's a lot of people are thinking about it. So,
Nigel.
Yeah, we were having a conversation yesterday at work about the difference in home theaters when you use LED panels versus screens. And that when you use the screen, you're getting projected, reflected light back onto your eyeballs. When you're using these LED panels of all varying different sizes, your home theater, it's much more tiring on the eyes, and people are really having to turn the LED panels down. And so to follow up from Alex, that's what I worry about with some of these devices that go in front of your eyes. When they're the light source and they're not reflected, it may not be great viewing.
And Jeffrey?
Anybody that has an audio or visual issue is not going to be part of a VR situation. So it's bottom line is you pretty much take out a good amount of the population. And also, going back to the last question, exactly what Alex said, it fits with the VR realm. Is they haven't figured out how to make a good VR meeting yet, or a good VR event. Therefore, it's gonna try and do the old ways, and it's just not gonna be the best thing in the world.
I was thinking the other side effect of that is if you're putting something on your face, then you're not going to have the opportunity to see people's faces. Alex, another thought?
The other thing is you can't do something else when people are boring. I mean, we have to think about these things. This is an important issue. Like, once you have the thing on, you can't check your email. You can't go order something on Amazon that you just remembered. You can't do all, catch up on your texts and everything else, or check Twitter or watch TikTok or any of these things that people may or may not do during a slow meeting. And so I think that we still have to fix, and I think we're doing the best we can here, we still have to fix the experience of meetings because most of them are super slow. So especially events are really slow on in person. Like, how many, as someone who shot close-ups for the last 15 years of people sitting in an event, most of the events after the first hour, the big challenge is trying to find a frame of somebody without somebody looking down or sleeping. That's usually the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Good point. Let's go to our next question.
Mark Giuliani from Washington, D.C. asks, has anyone made the transition from Livestream to Vimeo? Are there better ways to move your library rather than download, upload, download, upload, download, upload?
Go ahead, Alex.
I don't think so. I think you have to download them. I think you have to move them. It's two different library systems. They're not, even though they're the same. You're talking about Livestream, the company after it was absorbed by Vimeo, but I believe that they're in two different environments. And so I don't think that there's any way for you to, there's no seamless way for them. They should probably do the transport better. But I think that the only way that I know of to do it is to download them all and put them all up. And that's generally from every service. But Vimeo, if you're talking about the VOD, is essentially an entirely different service than Livestream. Now they've definitely made progress in, and are you able, Vimeo should be able to take your live streams themselves. Are you talking about new live streams or old ones?
The old ones that have been formed into a library. And
right, because the new ones should be able to go into Vimeo. Like, if you live stream or when you do a new live stream, is it still ending up in the old one?
Well, I'm using Vimeo now to do the actual live streaming, but
which is still
have this old library. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So live stream, when before it was bought by Vimeo.
Right.
When you're doing Vimeo, you're still using Livestream's infrastructure, but it now goes in. But it's now in the same data container. Whereas the older live stream is not in the same data container.
Right.
And so you do have to move them from one to the other manually. It would be
And I've
difficult for
hesitated
them.
moving because there's unlimited storage on Livestream.
Yeah, that's why they're not going to.
I know.
They're not going to make anything easy for you to add cost for no revenue.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
All right, makes sense. Let's go to our next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware asks, Alex, would you mind giving us a recap of yesterday's Gray Matter show?
Yeah, we'll have this
Mitchell?
one up really fast. Go ahead, Mitchell. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm kind of more interested in the technical background of it, how it went off, and how do you think it appeared?
I think it was an improvement. So you may be watching me fiddle because it's not a couple things. One is that what we're doing is, so Leo decided to come down. He wanted to see Michael. Like the two of them have, and so he was excited to come down. And so Leo Laporte was on yesterday. He came down and we've taken in the mornings, we've taken over the pit at the old ILM building. So this is a floated room. It's really nice. And so anyway, so we've taken over the pit. It's a really nice place to record. And so we set up in the morning. The back, it takes us about an hour to get set up down there because it's not our room. It actually belongs to the lead guitarist for Stroke 9. So anyway, so we take over John's room, and so we get in. I'm doing the show now from there, and the reason I do the show from there on Fridays is so that I can make sure it's working, so that everything we did is working, and then we tune it a little bit based on my experience. And so anyway, so we have we're experimenting with those, the mics that just to give you some technical background, we're experimenting with the mics that Carl had recommended, and I can never remember the name of them, but anyway. And they're pretty good. They're pretty good. They're very sensitive to plosives. So that's the only thing that, there's a big diaphragm at the top. I'm going to have to get something for that. Anyway, but we set them up. One of the things I did, I think I mentioned it earlier, and we can get rid of that question because I'll just talk about it now. But we got we finally did a project. This was the first one I've done where I had 2 Insta360 links. And so I ran the show with that. So I had one show trained on Michael and one show trained on Leo. And I was doing the Insta3, and then I ran those inputs because they're USB. I just ran them into Memo Live. So they're in Memo Live, and I, cut between the show there. Couple things. One is the Insta3 link. You can definitely just get a little list of the Insta3 link. I'm sure that if I had 5 cameras, I got another one coming, so I'll have 3 soon. But if I had 3 cameras, I can just jump to them. The problem is there's a little bit of a pause to get to the other camera, and it's during a show. If you want to make adjustments, it's not seamless. It's just that it is like what you want is to have the presets for all the cameras in one place, so that you can just hit what you want, not have to go to each camera and make those adjustments. So you couldn't really, it would be very difficult to do a show in the current state of the software, but it's great. I mean, they look great. Being able to adjust is great. Now, the mistake I made there was the first time I did it a couple of weeks ago, I just had it zoom back and swing back and forth between the two of them, which Shannon hated. So anyway, I just like never do that again. So anyway, so we got the, So we got the second one and we trained it on each of them, but I still put it in the center because I was kind of trying to recreate this experience of you're sitting there with them. It's okay, but it's not a great frame. So next week next week is a virtual one, but the next time we have 2 people in there, I'm going to pull those cameras out and put them in a more traditional space with another camera in the center that's getting a wide of the 2 of them. And so then I'm kind of building a more traditional show multi-camera. I felt that the Memo Live did a pretty good job. When I'm taking a layer and turning it on and off over top of another layer, it's perfectly seamless. When I do layer presets at the bottom, I think it's losing some frames. like when I click between the 2 of them, because I'm forcing some frames off. I'm forcing it off and forcing the other ones on, so that because I was doing something more complex with some of them. When I do the force off, I don't feel like that transition is perfect. So I'm going to talk to. We'll send in some stuff. So it was a very subtle. It's a very subtle thing. It's probably a frame. That's not that doesn't line up there. That bothers me a little bit. So I got to take a look. I'm going to record it and analyze it. It might have just been something for me. I did do a 2-up with them, which I apologize for folks. I was actually changing the 2-up while it was on. I didn't realize that while I was doing it, and I was adjusting the frames and everything else. I find that the interview thing, part of the reason I was forcing frames was because the interview preset is funky. You know, like it does this thing where it goes, I'm going to have this person with a layer below you. I'm like, okay, well, just give me two. Let me just give you two inputs. You know, like I just, you know, and I couldn't find I thought I could have sworn that there was a SuperSource there that I couldn't find in the list. So anyway, as far as that goes, what was happening is those two mics go into the Scorpio. That's what I was recording with. So I had a Scorpio there that the two mics went into. That has Dante in it. So then we've already run Dante to that room. So it's just an Ethernet to there that goes upstairs to be recorded by Boom Recorder and a Joko, as well as the recorder downstairs. And then we throw it into a webinar. The next step for us is to start webinar. The next thing I want to do is be able to start webinar early so that there's graphics coming out of Memo or other things like that, and so that, you know, there's something nicer there than, and again, the video part is all R&D, and I'm trying to keep it not publishing the video because I don't get very many places where I just get to play. Like I'm just going to play with something and figure something out for a show, and so I'm not. You'll notice that the video is crazy because I'm doing things that I would not do in a regular show because it's really an audio show that you can see, you know. And I felt like because 95% of the group right now is us, I feel like I can get away with that. But it allows me to evolve faster. The next one, my goal next week is to do it with ZoomISO. So that's the next thing I'm going to try to do is ZoomISO into an ATEM, you know, for the next one, just to kind of experiment with a different model. But you'll probably see me going back and forth. I'm trying to test the idea of doing it in Memo because it's a great compact way to do this without a lot of extra stuff, and do it with, now I did that on a studio, so it had almost no draw. I'm going to try to get it working on a Mac Mini, mostly because my wife does stuff that I'm trying to figure out how to hand her, like, here's how to do a production. So anyway, so I'm going to try to do it in the ATEM with Mix Effect and the ATEM and, you know, Decklink card next week that we do it, but that's someone over Zoom. So anyway, that's the technical breakdown of what we're working on so far. And by the way, the interview comes out on Tuesday, and it's amazing. Like, Leo it's a great interviewer talking to a great interviewee. So it was a really good conversation. Tons of questions from our audience. I mean, I think that's the thing that I think even Leo was kind of amazed by, these questions coming in from all over the world. And so it's a cool experience.
You get a taste of that international flavor. It's hard to go back to the single guy.
Yeah, at NAB New York, the guys in the vmix booth had an Insta360 link right on the computer, right at the front of their booth. And one of the things that you'll notice if you look at the beta version for vmix 26 is it specifically highlights that they're going to add PTZ functionality specifically for the Insta360 link. So it's kind of wild to look in the notes and see it specifically calls out that camera. So with my bird dog, what you can do is you can say, and any other PTZ that supports presets, is you get a thumbnail. When you find your shot, you can click and say, create virtual input at this location, and it'll give you a thumbnail. And now you have a thumbnail that you can click on, and it'll bounce right to that. The way I have it set up is with a touch screen, and then I make it so that I can just touch that input, or a volunteer could touch that, and it just bounces right over to that spot.
That's great. You know, there's Insta360 looks like they have a lot of API support, SDK support on their website. They just don't have the link up yet. So but the fact that almost all their other cameras have an SDK, it has me bullish on that they're going to give us more control over that camera over time.
We're going to make a run on the cameras. Good, Mitchell?
I think the mics you were talking about, Alex, are the T-Bones.
Mm-hmm.
And the other question I've got,
by the way, the T-Bones have a little bit of self-noise. Like they're $85 mics. I probably won't keep on using them for this. I wanted to experiment with it and really force it in there because I can filter it. It's not live. But they are, you know, a little bit of self-noise. The USB is too low. They're very sensitive to plosives, but for an $85 mic, they're amazing. But for a general mic that we're going to use, it probably isn't going to be what I keep using.
How many folks are working in the back end to make that show?
Oh, it's just well, Kevin helps me get set up, and he helps manage the records. Shannon helps with the she manages all the remote hosts or all the hosts. She interacts with them, trains them, preps them, sends the mics, and then I do the show. And then we've got Chad helps with some of the tech stuff, and Colin, who's a friend of mine, does the business end of things. So there's I think 5 of us that are working on it, along with Michael. But in the actual show, it's just. I'm doing the whole show. Like when we go live, Shannon hands the show off and manages it. But and that's part of the goal, is that it's not we want to test the idea. It's a podcast. It shouldn't be complicated, and I'm doing my best not to make it more complicated than it already is. But we do have Chad will be in the background, like managing questions and so on and so forth too, because I did get to a limit, of that, of what can be done. And Shannon moves the person in. So there's a little bit of a virtual team thing that's kind of moving on there, but we're trying to keep it as simple as possible.
Peter.
Just to save you a little bit of time, Alex, you want to use the split screen view, not the reporter view. I actually had that conversation with Oliver about a month ago.
We should.
Reason.
I think I'm ready to have there's a bunch of us that are kind of doing Memo Live stuff, and it's updated a lot. Probably a good second hour somewhere where we just or a lab, where a bunch of us trade notes about how we're using it, because it's a really cool app. It does. There's at first the interface made me a little crazy, and Oliver, to his credit, spent almost a decade trying to get me to use it. Because I just kept on opening it and not understanding, but I've used it for a bunch of other little, smaller shows that I don't need a big pile of hardware. And it's just, it gives you a fluidity of working on something while you're working on the show, and the ability to automate certain things. That's really great. So anyway.
I will say that once I had the aha moment that it's just like Photoshop and it works in layers, that was the aha moment for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some pretty powerful stuff. Maybe we'll see something like that on the show soon. Let's go to our next question.
David Brady from New York City asks, would the AJA bridge be a smooth method to add NDI capability to an existing infrastructure? And he gives us a link from AJA.
Go ahead, Alex.
I think the AJA is a pretty expensive way to do that. I think that if I'm correct, the bridge is like $15,000 or $20,000 for it there. It's a very powerful 13,000. Yeah, I can't remember what the number was. But I think that it is. If you have production infrastructure, it's going to fit right in with that production infrastructure and give you the creature comforts that you need and the reliability that AJA is going to bring to it. It's probably, again, not the most cost-effective way to do an ingest of NDI, but it's a very effective tool, and it's got a lot of scalability.
Yeah. So, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that we had them on to show that.
There's a previous show where they talk about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha. Let's go to our next question.
Hasmukh Gajar from Cape Town in South Africa asks, in Gray Matter yesterday, noticed 2 cameras, which was great, as it showed both Michael and Leo. Then noted you used SuperSource and lower thirds. It made great viewing. Is this Alex moves slow but incrementally?
Yes. like it's just, with a lot of the stuff that I'm doing with ZoomISO, and especially with the show, office hours has gotten to a point where it is big, and it's, there's Isadora, control, and there's universe, and there's all these things. And I think that it's very important for us to keep moving that forward. But I also think it's important to get our arms around how does a single operator produce a show, and do it effectively. And so this is kind of me, because we're not distributing the video part. You only see the video of Gray Matter if you go to the live stream. Like, we're not producing any of these other ones. And so it gives Michael the comfort. He's a radio person. He's not really he's like, I don't know if we should ever do video. So it gives Michael the freedom to do that. But it also gives me the freedom to experiment, because what's important is that the audio is good. And then after that, I can keep playing. So you'll probably see it be more of an R&D lab than the video. Will do lots of things during the show that may not be perfect. And I'm also taking advantage of the fact that at some point, the office hours group will be a very small percentage of the people watching, but right now it's 95%. So it's of anything interesting on Saturday morning to talk about, because we're experimenting. You'll see new experiments and so on and so forth. And Michael's fine with that. I've talked to him about it. So it lets me just play, and I don't get to do that very often. Usually, I'm working on shows that if there's one wrong cut, there'll be like a week of meetings about it. so I, for me to have something that I can play in is very freeing and it makes it fun for me as well.
Good, Peter.
Just to reiterate, you were using Memo Live yesterday to do all those effects too yesterday, as opposed
Everything.
to your common statement about wanting to do with a hardware solution.
And I saw
you're doing a software solution.
I am, and because I'm trying to figure out, specifically, my wife does lots and lots of meetings, and I want to figure out a way that I can hand off a Mac Mini and have something really simple for her to just be able to put together a great looking meeting. And I'm trying to figure out whether it'll be an ATEM or whether it'll be something like Memo. And so we're kind of trying to figure that out. And I feel like I want to be able to I want to know how it works in vmix. I want to know how it works in OBS, how it works in Memo, how it works on an ATEM, how it works in the cloud. And I want to be able to do, so you'll see that show do all of those things over time. So I'm getting a vmix station set up so that I can jump into that. And I have, and that'll be the OBS/vmix, and then Memo, and then Ecamm. And so I'm trying to you'll see me do all of these things in these shows because I'm trying to understand how the best way to approach each show in that area. And I firmly believe now that I could literally show up at someone with a backpack and put together a very good looking show with a new Mac laptop, 3 of the links, Memo Live, and a good, a mix pre. If I had an interview with some folks, I could set that up in about 20 minutes with some little lights. But I could show up with a 1510 in a backpack and put together a very solid show. And that's what I'm trying to, kind of figure out is how do I make it not, driving a broadcast truck in and putting together something that I think those cameras just look great. And the amount of control I have on them is really high. And I think that so I'm trying to solve something that is like, I can put it together really fast. I can set it all up. Someone shoots it and they're like, I can't believe that someone just showed up in a backpack and shot that show. So I think that's what we're trying to work on. And that's how you do 1,000 shows a week, Guy.
Let's go to our next question.
James Babbitt from San Diego asks, great audio and video on Gray Matter with Leo Laporte. Thanks for extending the interview longer than 60 minutes. He wants to know how many people were watching the show.
I think we had about 75 people watching the show yesterday. So Friday's been a little bit of a challenge. We get, usually 10, 20, maybe 30 people. So 75 was a big jump. And it was Leo. So we're all, but I thought it was good. It was good. And the time frame of how long we can go, we'll go up to 90 minutes. And most of our guests are pretty high end. I mean, if you look at the people that are coming in on Gray Matter, and their time frame is very compressed, so we can't go over 60 minutes. And Leo, while also being very busy, Friday is a slow day for him. So he was able to he was kind enough to give us a little bit more time. But typically, if we had gotten Leo on almost any other day, he'd be like, "You got 60 minutes." So it's and he's used to long form.
Does your parking meter run out after 90 minutes, Alex, or does it depend on the guest?
It's mostly just Michael's comfort of just how he's used to running that show, and we do these shows without any break, so it's just I think that it is we kind of talked about where he was comfortable, just kind of doing those shows, and we felt like 90 minutes was kind of the outer edge of what we needed to do, and so we do try to keep them at near 60 minutes for everyone. We're requesting more of them to not have hard outs so that we can try to get a little bit more, especially if we're going to cut some stuff out or edit it. But it's a really good show. If you haven't listened to graymatter.show, I would recommend it. I mean, incredible guests, Leo and Ken Burns and there were, Susan Jackson and all these folks and we've got Michael Connolly coming up next Friday, who he wrote the novels that became Bosch, and Michael's Rolodex is extremely deep. So
there was a discussion there about voice fatigue. Does that factor in the 60-minute window?
I don't think so. I think it's just a matter of, I think right now, I think that it is a long time to talk to somebody. And I think we're not so much thinking about Michael, we're thinking about more of the guest. Again, Leo could go on and on and on. I think that but I think that we're also thinking about the guests in general. They're not used to doing interviews that long. They're just not. And I think that we have a concern that the guests will wear out. Leo won't, but the guests will wear out. If we do too much time, and they don't stop talking. They just stop saying as many articulate things.
They don't shut off. They fade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say you solved the calendaring problem too, because now it's consistently and it goes on for multiple Fridays. So we now know to show up.
Part of the problem is that webinar is, anyway, the webinar changing the dates caused all kinds of problems in webinar. And so until we had a solid, like we're doing it here at this time, it was just it was doing things that we didn't expect when we move one date or change things. I don't think we're going to keep on using webinar. We're just using it for now. I think we're going to, I think that it's, we love Zoom and ZoomISO and everything else. I think that the webinar event products are a little weak. And so I don't, and they're pretty frustrating for us. So, I think that we're probably going to move past that, because once we start doing a video show, before we were doing webinar because we were having two people talk in Zoom and we were just, we were recording the ends and everything else. Once we move to I'm doing a video production and I'm just simply pushing it into webinar, it brings up the question of why am I using webinar for that? I mean, I can just stream that, I can put that on a lot of different things. And so I think that that's definitely a discussion, because there's no Q&A inside a webinar. A webinar is literally a platform to send you video as a group. And so at that point, I can just send you to Makana and embed a video into it. And the viewership currently is low enough that I could just do it off of I could literally stream it off of a server. But I can also, without any real expense, but we're talking to Cashfly about using, experimenting with their CDN, with their HLS CDN. And so that's probably where we're going to go.
The only thing I could think of is you can force 1080p to your audience on a webinar. It's one thing. If you wanted to talk about the Zoom distributions, yeah.
If I just stream an HLS, an embedded HLS, I can now give them a much better. I mean, it will look like, especially when they're in the room, it's going to look a lot better, because I can just say I want to send you to send you a 4K stream if I wanted to. At that point, without any 4K 60 if I want to send, if that's what I want to send. So there's a lot of things that I can that I have a lot of access to when I'm not trying to fit into something else there. So. Anyway, so I think that, again, I think the webinar is good for some folks. I think that when you start doing it, it's, Zoom itself and ZoomISO and what's being built for broadcast tools is irreplaceable. That no one's even close to them. But I think that the webinar and event platforms need a lot of work. They were built for something else that we're not doing anymore. so it's, I think that I don't think that there's a way to fix them. I think that I've really thought about it a lot. I think that someone needs to start building a new one, that is not encumbered by the past, and then roll it out next year at Zoomtopia or something, but not try to fix the ones that are there. There's too much cruft,
All right. Well, Ken, that's probably the last of our gray matter questions.
All right, I think so. This one comes from Craig Kadoki. He asks, with yesterday's gray matter, both Leo and Michael were framed slightly from the side rather than straight on. Is this a change of preferences? What about having the talent looking straight into the camera?
Well, that's the problem with having them straight. That's what the problem is with having them in the same room, is that they can't, if they're looking at each other, I can't put the cameras right between them. So, I guess I could, but it'd be a little distracting. So I was trying to get as close to that as possible, but that is why it was interesting. I was watching it live and I was thinking this would actually be better in some ways over Zoom. If you have two teleprompters, and people are looking into those teleprompters, it will look better. If they have good production, it's going to be a better experience for the viewer, because the viewer can exist in seeing the people talking in a space that doesn't exist in the real world. And I think that is a very compelling solution, is having everyone look, you're looking right at them, they're looking right at you. And so when you get those tools correct, it's pretty compelling. So, and so I can swing it over further. It will be better in the future, but it'll never be eye to eye the way you get it in Zoom.
Peter?
That's it. It reminded me of video, or actually they aren't really videos, they're films of Edward R. Murrow doing interviews. Right. It's that style, very much more relaxed. Honestly, I like the look for that, from that reason, right? It was a relaxed discussion, not a direct hardcore interview.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great space to do it in.
All right, let's move on. We have our education hour coming up. So let's go to our next question.
Ricky Gore from Nashville, Tennessee comes in to ask, looking for a hardware recommendation for running ZoomISO. Currently have a 2019 Mac Pro, but can only get about 4 stable ISOs and Screenshare. Would a 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro be a good portable solution?
Got a guy? Then Peter?
Yeah, it would be good, but it's probably overkill and just a little bit too much money in my eyes for what you want to do. That computer is $3,499. Look at how many Mac Mini M1s that you could buy for $699. Plus, you would be able to buy your associated hardware so you can pick up your Sonnet. I'd even get the Duo Moto, the bigger one where you can add a couple cards inside of there for future proofing. But I wouldn't buy anything until after Zoomtopia, so that's coming up on November 7th, 8th, 9th. And then
Good, Peter.
We'll see what gets unveiled.
Oh, sorry. Go, Peter.
I was about to, I'll completely agree with Guy, because that's exact. I'm taking my M1 Mini and putting it in a box with a Sonnet box just to do that. I don't see any reason to spend $4,000 to replace it with a 16-inch MacBook Pro M1 or M2 box. Just doesn't, the math doesn't play out.
Go ahead, Mark.
So the benefits of using the small 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro laptop are you get the keyboard and the screen that comes with it. The advantages of the M1 Mac Mini are you get a lot more ports, and you use up those 2 ports on the 13-inch MacBook Pro pretty quickly. Also, I've noticed that the air distribution through the MacBook Pros leaves that keyboard a little warm, as opposed to having the heat in the Mac Mini separate with more air going through it.
Alex?
We're going to talk a lot about this on Monday too. But we did a lot of math over yesterday. You can absolutely, the laptop will easily do 8, and it can do 12 outputs. The Mac, if you want to run something like Memo on it, I would highly recommend a Studio rather than a Mac Mini. You can get, the Studio will, I think, easily do Memo Live plus 8 inputs, fed in over Siphon. Siphon, we definitely saw some incredible performance differences between Siphon and NDI. So I would definitely not use NDI for a lot of feeds into an internal machine. I would use Siphon for that. If you're going machine to machine, then NDI is the solution.
Yeah, I think maybe the scare is just having that machine on the same hardware, but 4 inputs should be good. And what Alex is alluding to is that Monday we have a second hour based on ZoomISO. So a lot of practical solutions, some people that have been in the field and have tested different configurations. So bring your questions on Monday. Let's go to our next question.
David Brady from New York City says a company named Domestica, and he gives us a web link there, offers some interesting training online, all with a consistent look and feel. Do you think these are produced in-house or remotely? I've taken a few and found them compelling.
Alex?
This is like a great site. I've never seen it before. I just saw it because David put it up there. And it's absolutely shot in-house. I mean, this is very consistent. It looks like a great idea, and I'm definitely going to take a look at them. They have the same thing that Udemy does, which is every once in a while, right now they're on sale. Every once in a while, everything's $10 and it'll be $60 later. And then you have to wait for the next sale to buy anything because you know that's what it should be. But looks really cool. It looks like they've taken what Udemy does and taken it out of people doing it on their own and putting them into a studio. And it's pretty impressive. I'm definitely going to check some of these out.
All right, domestica.org. We'll check that out then. Let's go to our next question.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana, says, we do ruthless reviews of aspects of our personal studios, Could we do a second hour of members submitted productions?
Go ahead, John.
I don't think that would work nearly as well, because where you learn a lot from watching the ruthless reviews is when the person hears the feedback and then makes a change. And you immediately see how moving a light or changing and setting on a camera fixes the problem.
Micheal?
If you had to do it during the week, Sunday, because we're not recording, you might end up with some strikes depending on the content of your production. But maybe this should be considered for after hours as a lab or a program where you could describe it a lot more and there's no time constraints.
Jeffrey?
Also, I don't see it as a ruthless review. What I see it as is somebody throws out an idea, and then a panel can give them suggestions as to how to do the cameras, how to do the how to set things up, maybe script some stuff, and get it in the right direction. So yeah, it wouldn't be as much of a ruthless review as it is a helpful production, the way I see it.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that I would be happy to do teardowns the way we used to use them. If you go to the Pixel Core YouTube page, you'll see old teardowns that I did. And we could definitely do that with folks. The big thing I'm always concerned about is that if your client watches it and we tear it down, we take a show that your client was perfectly happy with and we make it really upsetting for them. And so that's the only, because I can sit there and tear down broadcast TV. So imagine how I do it with lower budget. So anyway, and even my own, I could tear, but I would never tear mine down on YouTube. And so I tear those, that's a private conversation. So anyway, that would be my only concern. But I think that if people want to submit things and really want that feedback, I think it'll be a great second hour to talk about it. It's just a matter of being careful of what you put up there.
Sounds good. Let's go to our next question.
This question comes from Douglas Carmichael. Douglas asks, has there been any thought of using zero configuration VPN tools like Tailscale or ZeroTier within the OH 2.5 infrastructure?
Alex?
No, we won't do it. Because we'll build our own VPNs. There's no reason for us to do that. And once we're doing all the hardware infrastructure and so on and so forth, we would, even if we did it in the cloud, we'd want to own the VPN. I don't want to give, I wouldn't use an external VPN. So.
Yeah, typically those tools are used for unfriendly or uncooperative environments. Let's go to our next question.
Stan Chan from San Francisco asks, what options are there to record ISOs off of an ATEM Constellation 8K other than sending it to a Hyperdeck Studio? Would sending outputs to an ATEM SDI Extreme ISO be a good option?
Go ahead, Alex.
That actually sounds like a great option if you want H.264 recordings. So if all you need is the H.264 recordings, I didn't even think about just grabbing 8 ISOs from the thing. I mean, we use Hyperdecks because we want usually ProRes recordings, from those things so that we can do additional color correction and so on and so forth. But I think that it would be that would be a totally valid solution if you had 8 and you wanted to record. It's probably the easiest way to grab 8 stably.
Go to our next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. David has been doing great on Ecamm Labs. Do we have any plans on doing the same for vmix?
And that answer is we don't have any plans currently, but if you are an expert in vmix and would like to lead the discussion, we'd love to have you on, or a cadre of individuals that like to be the experts on the show. We'd be very happy to have a vmix discussion. Alex, do you concur?
100%. We'd love to do a vmix one. It's our labs are because we have volunteers that have, whether it's all the way from Andy to David and to Ken to Elle to, we have all these, Bill, all of these folks are volunteering their time, and we didn't reach out to them. They reached out to us, or they were interested in doing it. And they've been very gracious with their time. If someone's willing to do something every week, or every month on vmix, we'd love to have them.
So the thing to do is go into the second hour suggestion chat, and we have this topic of vmix. We'll ask, and this is typically the way we build our second hours, to make sure that we have someone that can answer those deep Mukana questions on a particular topic. If we don't have a guest that's an expert on their particular product, we can have internal guests, so long as we know that there'll be a panel that can answer those questions. So in the chat, you can put your support or reach out to me directly for a particular topic, and we'll make it happen. Let's go to our next question.
Paul Valhus from Austin, Texas asks, this morning in Zoom ISO Trial, I made it as far as outputs selection, but the selection row is blank. What's the fix for this?
Go ahead, Alex.
Go ahead, Josh. You go.
I think if your selection row is blank, it might be the fact that you did not have the permissions enabled, if I'm reading your question right. Peter, what do you think?
I actually, it's either that or he has missed the fact that there's a downward caret next to it that says that's a pull down list. And if you have anything other than participant selected or participant screen sharing, it is going to be blank. Because active speaker is by definition blank.
Yeah, and you do have to set the parameters for each of those two. So what might be helpful to you is some people have put the screenshots of how their capture is configured. That might help you to get the right configuration.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
I think you might also need to select how many you want first at the very top, and then the list populates itself.
That is correct. Yep. Hopefully that helps you, Paul. Let's go to our next question.
Harshi Trivedi of Daytona Beach, Florida, says, we really got a good taste of gray matter. Who's on next, Alex? And if they wanted to listen to another high-profile show like Leo's, how much would it cost our listeners? Where do they go to register?
Alex?
Michael Connolly, the novelist, is on next Friday, and so that'll be a fun one to do. Yeah, so he's going to be on, and it is for the folks that took advantage of the free version. It's free. For those who are already in gray matter, it now is to watch it live is now $5 a month to sign up for via memberful to become. There's a Discord, and you can watch the live. You can ask questions and be part of the show. So, but that's the current subscription.
And let's go to our next question.
Paul Valhus from Austin, Texas says, rumor has it that Dogecoin is about to become the coin of the realm, the Twitter realm, that is. Doge is not in the Bitcoin family. Where will this lead?
John?
Elon Musk way overpaid for Twitter. I think he's trying to make some of that money back by goosing the sales of Dogecoin so he can earn 30% in Dogecoin in 24 hours. So that's my suspicion.
Jeffrey?
And he's also got to be very careful with what he does and how he puts Dogecoin in Twitter, because now he owns both, and he doesn't want anybody coming after him with any type of monopolization type situation there. So we'll see what happens. And of course, if Twitter becomes a big failure, Dogecoin's going to drop right back down.
There you go, folks. You heard it here first. Well, that ends our question and answer section. Next, we're going to shift into our education hour. We appreciate all of our producers asking our Q&A questions on media and production. But John, we're going to hand things over to you next in the education hour. What do you got planned for us?
Thank you, Josh. During today's education hour, we'll be discussing PowerPoint. Specifically, I'll be sharing some tips and tricks for breathing life into a dead deck using animation. How much is too much? What will make your work stand out? Join us in about 5 minutes to find out.
Mr. Clark, very clever question yesterday.
I have a little laryngitis myself. No, just kidding. But I was harking back to my own experience as a submarine operations officer. We were in a complex operation and I lost my voice and realized for the first time that I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do my job without my voice. I was otherwise healthy, but all of a sudden I was useless and other people had to take over and communicate on the radio and the sonar and so forth. So ever since then, I realized watching the interviewees and the hosts that their whole life is about speech, and when that's throttled down, it's a sobering experience.
I was laughing at Leo because, when California people come to Vegas, their nose starts bleeding and then their voice gets dry.
Please raise your hand on the test question.
No.
Good morning and welcome to today's Education Hour. We have a great panel today with lots of people with different diverse experience, and that's fantastic because today we're going to be talking about a tool that almost everybody uses. We'll be discussing PowerPoint and how you can make the most out of your slide decks using animation. And we can also talk about Keynote or other tools, but I'll primarily be using PowerPoint as I demonstrate a few beginner, intermediate, and advanced techniques. So as we're getting started here this morning, I'm hoping that our panel can help us understand a little bit about how you've used PowerPoint, as well as things that your best tips or tricks, that sort of thing, before we dive right into the program. So, Chris Clark.
Hello. I accidentally raised my hand, but I'll pretend that I intended to answer the question. I've used PowerPoint ever since it was a new alternative to overhead projector slides. Remember those days? Looked like a toaster oven with a periscope. In any case, PowerPoint for me was a way to move away from paper handouts, which was the custom when I started teaching in higher education, to something that seemed more engaging. That was the plan anyway. That was the marketing idea. But it turned out that much like the unexpected pivot to virtual instruction in March of 2020, professors weren't ready to make good use of PowerPoint. We tried to do what we did with paper handouts, but using a different technology. And it was boring, and it broke all the rules that eventually got disseminated about minimizing the number of words and not turning your back on the class to read the slide to them. All kinds of rookie mistakes that hundreds and thousands of professors made and kept making. So, and then it was often the case that the technology in the classrooms that were equipped with a projector and so forth was tricky to set up properly. It almost never was a turnkey operation. That's what it was advertised to be. So I'm sure veterans of IT departments have a lot of stories about calls at 7 or 8 o'clock at night to come to room 252 of the education building and help the professor figure out how to get the projector projecting. So it doesn't have many happy memories from that era. We were all fumbling around, and students were not impressed with the use of the technology because it was used in a boring way. But since then, mostly through the help of one of my sons, who's become a kind of a graphics guru using PowerPoint. So he's become a heavy user and knows how to use 90% of the features available, the invisible features available in PowerPoint, to do graphics. And that's what he does for a living, basically, to translate numerical data into visualizable form for clients. And so through his tutelage, I've learned a little bit about how to use PowerPoint as a graphics program. So I'm happy. I don't think in terms of slide decks. I think in terms of one image that I'm trying to polish and create and use to augment something I've written for publication. So that was a long answer. If I had expected to be called on, I would have made it shorter.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Clark. And it's interesting that you brought up the overhead transparency first, because that was in some ways one of the first telestration tools. And really, the rules of visual presentation have never changed. It's just when we made the tools easier and ubiquitous for people, people use them without knowing how. What are your thoughts, Tony?
I am guilty of following the same directions as Dr. Clark, in that my intention was to raise my hand to participate in the panel and not really speak to this point. But what I will say is that my use of PowerPoint is exclusively with the house of worship that I'm working with, and they are determined to use PowerPoint. I am personally interested in Keynote kinds of activities, but I need to figure it out for them. And so I'm asking a few questions later on to see if we can figure out how to best use PowerPoint for them.
Great. And I think a lot of teachers are in the same scenario where the only tool they're given is that particular tool. And that's why we're talking about it today. Mark?
So I do like Keynote a lot, but I find myself using PowerPoint quite a bit more, because as an architect, we make presentations in competitions to compete to get work. And so we're presenting to selection committees who are going to pick out whoever will design and build a project. And so we use it really as a way to tell a story, because too many times I've seen people get up and make presentations and start reading bullet points, and it just puts people right to sleep. So what we've been able to do is teach people that we want to tell a story, and we do that by bringing a lot of visuals into the PowerPoints and trying to stay away from bullet points.
Probably the most important thing you can do is stay away from those bullet points. I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to start by showing just some very introductory animation techniques and why you might want to use them. And the trick about animation, especially in PowerPoint or Keynote, is most people either do too little or too much. And that's why I specifically use the term breathing life into your presentations with PowerPoint, is because you want your presentations to feel a little bit alive, but not too sporadic, not too much. You don't want it so much motion that it's distracting. And so we'll talk about the basic things that you can do in animation and how that can add to your slide deck instead of take away from it. So we should be able to see my screen now. I'm going to present my show. Realistically, most people, most of the time, should spend the vast majority of their slide deck only using 3 different animations. And it's there to highlight information on your screen so that your users can follow along. The most common one is a simple appear. And what appear does is it just takes something that wasn't there and makes it visible. There's no effect, there's no timing, there's no animation. It's just off or on like a light switch. And you can see this is what the appear looks like. If you want to get a tiny bit more sophisticated, some people will like to add a fade instead. And with a fade is you can set a timeline for how long it takes for the item to appear. I like to have about a 1-second fade because it's a nice gradual way to bring information into the screen without distracting your audience. And then lastly is the wipe. The wipe is one that a lot of people don't use, and I'm not sure why. It's one of my personal favorites. And what the wipe allows you to do is it allows you to choose the direction that your item will arrive. And that's really helpful in creating a sense of movement without a lot of complications. And so fade, appear, and wipe, I would say for me personally, are probably 60% of the animations that I use. And it's how you add them is you select the item, you come up to the animation tab in PowerPoint, and they're going to show up here in the entrance effect or the exit effect. You can either have them show up or leave. And one nice trick you can do, especially with wipe, and I'll show you why I like wipe so much, is I'm going to jump back into my presenter view, is this is a slide that I stole from one of my other slide decks I have for work to introduce people to the people in our department. And I just have a simple wipe exit effect, and on the screen there's a lot of blue rectangles, and they will just wipe down as I click ahead in my slide deck. And so I can talk about our director and the managers who report to our director and explain what each of these managers does, which teams they have in their team. And then I can go manager by manager and show their supervisors who report to them. And that way, our new hires can get a visual picture of the people that are their boss, their boss's boss, or their boss's boss's boss. And they will know these are people that if I see them at work, are people I can ask questions of. And so what you're seeing here, this is a simple wipe animation to lower a rectangle, and then another wipe animation to turn on a different rectangle. Or actually, I think it's actually a dissolve animation. And if I break down that slide, what I did is you can see there's this rectangle, and there's 4 rectangles down below. There's actually a total of 9 rectangles on the screen. So if I go into my selection pane, you can see this slide's a pretty complicated slide. If I hide some of these rectangles, that's my top layer, and here's that bottom layer. So the first animation, what it does is it takes the top level blue rectangle, which matches my background exactly, and then just wipes it down so you see the animation underneath it. The second one has a fade animation that fades in a semi-transparent rectangle. So again, these are just 4 different rectangles, and that causes a dimming on my screen so that I can really focus on one person at a time or one group of people at a time by just making them brighter or dimmer. So I've just combined those animations together here to make it highlight the information I want so that my users can understand better what I'm trying to share with them. And it's just using plain rectangles with one animation, or I guess technically 2. Let's take a look and see what is our first question, whoever's our question reader.
First question comes from Tony Mobley, and he asks, is it possible to run a PowerPoint with just the ATEM Mini to the Apple TV without screen mirroring?
Hey, Harshi, do you know the answer to this question, or were you raising for the previous one?
I was raising my hand for the previous one.
Right,
I would think that this would be possible regardless with ATEM. PowerPoint as such is just, intermediary. So I would think that it would still work as far as, what you're sharing on one screen or taking Apple TV to reflect onto the bigger screen.
It could be. And I think, Tony, it depends on what you're describing. You're saying with just the ATEM Mini to the Apple TV without screen mirroring. I'm not sure how you would get the signal from the ATEM Mini to the Apple TV because the Apple TV, to my understanding, doesn't have a webcam input, which is what the ATEM Mini outputs. I suppose if you used one of your previews, which goes through HDMI, that should be able to go into an Apple TV in. Wait, does that Apple TV doesn't have an in, does it?
I was in error. So what I really wanted to do was to get the PowerPoint into the ATEM for Zoom. And I was trying to figure out a way because the House of Worship has a 3rd generation Apple TV, but they only have one computer. So I was trying to figure out a way to get use the Apple TV to bring in the PowerPoint into the Zoom, as if the Apple TV wasn't a secondary device. And I was wondering if you had to have an ATEM in order to do that, if that would work then, or you just have to do screen sharing in Zoom in order to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure the answer on using that other than it seems like it'd be not the ideal way to set that up. Peter, do you have any insight on that?
Well, obviously the ideal way is a second computer going into the ATEM running PowerPoint, but unfortunately, that's not your option. The other option I've played with in the past, Tony, is create screenshots of all the slides, assuming that I've seen some of the stuff you've done. They're fairly static slides. They're not doing a lot, right? Save them as photos and use the photo sharing capability of the Apple TV.
All right. What's our next question?
Next question comes from Paul Valhus, and Austin, Texas. Oh, I'm sorry. This time he's in Cedar Creek. And he asked, what's the value of the 256 gigabit Metaquest Pro for education? Will it work with Zoom?
I think there's a lot to still be discovered with Metaquest and using VR in an education setting. For those who aren't familiar, the Metaquest Pro is the fancy VR set that is introduced recently by Facebook or Meta. And one of the problems with it is it has an incredibly high price tag, especially for an education market. So I would not expect to see any significant movement there, especially when we're thinking of K-12 education, until they can get their price significantly lower. Next question.
Next question comes from Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia, and here on the panel. And he asks, is there an improvement in PowerPoint with video on the deck from presenter like Keynote?
Tony, can you explain what you mean a little bit?
So with Keynote, you can have a presentation showing and you can bring yourself in on video, as Alex has demonstrated on numerous occasions. And I was just wondering, we had past conversations where it can be done in PowerPoint. And I was just wondering if there is an update to that having been improved.
Yeah, the question you're asking is about a tool called Cameo, and I can jump right back into my presentation and show you, yes, you can. I was going to share this a little bit later, but since you brought it up right now. So in PowerPoint, one of your options is a tool called Cameo, and this is just for Office 365 subscribers. And it's not rolled out to everybody yet, I don't think, but it should be in the next month or two. They're rolling it out group by group. So if you don't have it as an option, it will be there soon. It's going to be under the Insert tab, and you'll be able to insert a Cameo, which is over here on the right-hand side. And you'll be given a box that looks like this, and you can have it selected. And once you do, you can change the shape of your Cameo box as well as add borders or add effects, and you can use a morph slide to change the size and shape of your Cameo. One important thing is when you select a camera, you do need to click the drop down and choose which camera you want to use. And I'll show you what this looks like. So I can be talking about how PowerPoint has a new tool called Cameo. And you can see I can bring in a regular animation to bring my camera in. I just did a quick little pop in with a grow shrink effect. And then I can have my slide deck going to the side of me, which this is one way in PowerPoint that you can approximate a SuperSource, is you can have your camera with your content to the side of you. Or if you want to get extra fancy, you can actually have your Cameo be a full-size screen. And when you do that, it allows you to have lower thirds, for example. Or if you want to, this is, as far as I know, the cheapest and easiest way to have a telestrator. You can use your presenter tools to draw directly on the screen. Now I'm just drawing with my trackball, so it's not great drawing. One of the things I don't really like a lot about the presenter tools, as you can see, is it doesn't have a very wide pencil stroke on it, but you can change the color of your pencil. So if the yellow's not working out for you, you can draw a white instead or use the highlighter tool. So you can use PowerPoint and Cameo as a way to approximate a SuperSource or a lower thirds effect. That was a good question. And if I can get back to my Mukana, I could ask what's our next question?
Well, I can do that. The next question comes from Paul Valhus, and he asks, what's the online and local version pricing model for PowerPoint?
I can take that one. Most people will be signing up for the Office 365 subscription, which is probably the best way to handle any Microsoft product going forward. You can buy a single license for PowerPoint, but you will miss many features, including the Cameo feature is not going to come out for anyone other than Office 365 subscribers. Many institutions and schools subscribe for their employees or for their students, and so many people have a subscription through some organization otherwise. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana asks, I had a speaker at a meeting last week that I did that had a great deck on the history of photography from 1863 through 1900. But he kept turning around to point on the screen behind him, even with the laptop screen in front of him. How do you get people to stop that behavior?
Harshit?
I would say, first of all, it's always good to keep contact in front of you. So, it's a bad habit to break, but the easiest way I would just say is to at least coach them. Coaching is always a helpful thing to do in any case, but I think for presentation purposes is to make sure that you're looking at your audience when you're presenting. So just a couple coaching notes could potentially help.
Thank you. Chris?
My suggestion is to wait until he retires. I think it's a very difficult habit to break if you've been ingraining that habit in your behavior for many years. Or get him a large monitor to plug his laptop into.
Mark?
So it is a terrible habit to try and break for those of us who've given many presentations where you're trying to make a point and emphasize something on a slide, so you naturally turn to the slide and point to it. I think it should be the law that all future podiums have Wacom screens on them, so you could just write right in front of you and still at least be facing the audience.
Thanks, Mark. What do you think, Peter?
Well, besides the conference monitor in front of them and the Wacom tablet, you need to remind them if they turn away from the mic, no one will hear them talking.
And finishing up with Alex.
Yeah, we have manipulated people exactly the way Peter is talking about, where we give them podium mics. They ask for labs, and we don't give them, well, there's problems with the audio and the open speakers and everything else. And what that does is it locks them down. It just locks them to the podium, which we try to do so that camera angles are better and everything else. If you combine that with a confidence monitor that is in the podium, and a lot of times what we'll do is we'll take a monitor, depending on the width of the podium, and we'll set it down in short so that they still have controls. It just depends on how deep the podium is and whether you can get it, but it'll stick out a little bit, and then what we do is we dress that. So we basically pull we either put another piece of wood around it, or we drop duvetine, across the back of it. And what'll happen is that it won't look like the podium was changed if you do it well. I mean, a lot of times we have a little bit of time and access to carpenters. so we put that out, and basically it hides that monitor. You'd be surprised if they can see that monitor right in front of them. They very rarely will turn. They're using the PowerPoint as their notes, and they just need to see it. And so they keep turning because they can't tell. And so a lot of times when people have behaviors that don't work, it's because there's something. What you can control is their environment. And so finding ways, you can try to teach them to do it, but a lot of times if you can find a way to put things in a way that they do it in the way that is better. So you give them a podium mic, you put a monitor in front of them. What it does is it creates an environment that's very uncomfortable for them to go somewhere else, and very comfortable for them to go down the right path. And that's oftentimes a softer, gentler way without any discussion that will just draw them out, to go in a direction that makes the most sense for the presentation.
Alex, what's duvetine for those of us who don't know?
Duvetine, otherwise known as duvet, is a black cloth. So it's just you get rolls of it. If you go to an expendable store, so we go to, typically there's stores that are called expendable. Literally, if you do a search in almost any city, any major city, you'll see search for expendables, and those are always one or two stores that have stuff that you don't expect to get back, and duvetine is one of those things. And so it's a roll of cloth, and it's black and it's not shiny, and you can cut it, and we use it to clean up lots of things all the time.
Thank you very much. What's our next question?
Paul Valhus wants to know if we've ever played Powerpoint Roulette. He has an example on YouTube and says slides are random and you make up the presentation on the fly.
I don't see any answers from our panelists, but I think that would be a fun thing to do on an after hour someday when it was nice and slow. I think it's a great way to learn how to practice presenting, and could be a great way to practice presenting virtually, especially if we're talking about making sure you don't turn away. And one quick tip on turning away from camera is think of yourself like someone on stage and you want to turn. So if you have to turn for any reason on camera, try to turn so that your back isn't to the audience. So if I'm turning to my left, I would turn that direction. And if I needed to go to the right, I would turn that way. So I don't have to do a spin around and do acrobatics for my audience. What's our next question?
Bob Sturdivant from San Antonio, Texas wants to know if there's a way to build an interactive slide, that is a 3x3 box matrix, and students would say where to have the pre-made boxes placed onto the matrix.
So what I think you're talking, excuse me, about, Bob, is probably not possible in PowerPoint or Keynote because typically speaking, for your audience, they will only be able to click on things, if even that. But I'll show you a couple tips if you ever need to make a grid. And if you really want an interaction like an assessment where, say, you have a grid of boxes and you have items underneath, you want to click and drag items onto the boxes, you'll need an e-learning authoring software. And there's quite a few out there at various different price points. But you want something that has assessments, interactive assessments in an e-learning authoring software. But as far as making a grid goes, one trick I like to use is our distribution and alignment tools. And actually, that's why on my slide deck, which I'm sharing my screen again, I have 2 round circles on my slide deck that are center aligned to the 2 edges of my slide. And usually I turn these off once I've built the deck, but I thought this might come up, so I wanted to have them here. And these are tools that I use so I can make sure stuff lines up nicely. So you can see I've got my different boxes in front of us. I have my 2 alignment circles. And the reason why these alignment circles are important is because if you have 2 items on the outside edge of your slide deck, and you have any number of items that you want to make sure are evenly displaced amongst the slide, say I just want to choose these 2 boxes, what I can do is select my 2 boxes plus my 2 alignment circles, and then I can go over to my alignment pane, which is going to be under Shape Format, Align. I also have this in my Quick Access toolbar. But if you say distribute these horizontally, what PowerPoint will do is it will take all of your selected objects, and I have 4, and take the center point of the outermost 2, and it will try to make everything else spaced evenly between the 2 outermost center points. And so that way, if I had 2 boxes, now these 2 boxes are perfectly spread out across my slide. And if I wanted them to be aligned at the top there, that's a quick and easy way to make a grid fit your slide perfectly as your alignment tools. And if I decided later that I wanted more objects, all I would need to do is, again, select all my objects, and I'll use the distribute tool. Sorry, I'm a little lost on PowerPoint for Mac. And so I'm distributing these horizontally. And then these are still spaced out evenly, even though they don't fit on the slide because I have too many objects. So your align and distribute tool are really helpful for this sort of thing. For example, if I wanted these to be in a grid shape, I can select, excuse me, I have 3, 6, 7, pardon me. I'll make this 8 just for good measure. I can select 4 of them, and I can align them to my left, and I'll select 4 more, and I'll align those to the left. Now, all of them I have 2 columns that are lined up perfectly now, but they're not spread out evenly. So then to spread them out, I use the distribute tool. And so I identify where I want my topmost item and my bottommost item. So I'll just select these 2 here. And I want both columns to be the same height. So I select item number 6 and item number 7. I'm going to say align to the bottom, and that will make sure that the bottom of both objects is aligned perfectly. Take my 2 top items and I'll align them to the top. And then I can take my 2 columns and distribute them. So this is the fastest, easiest way to make a grid and make sure that everything lines up perfectly. Is your alignment tool. It's under the shape format, or you can add them to your quick access toolbar. So again, I select them, align them first, and then you distribute them. And now I have a perfectly distributed grid on my slide deck. All right, let's go back to our questions. Ken, what's our next question?
From Paul Walhus in Cedar Creek at the moment, what's the best remote clicker for a PowerPoint presentation?
Alex?
Okay, so you said best. So best is still a DSAN perfect queue. You can actually, what you then need to do is send the USB connection, the USB information back through that. So that's the easiest one for a traditional person to use. Now there are some web-based ones. I think that, and there's web-based ones that will pass that information as well. But the best one for people who have already been doing this is to give them something that they're used to and then figuring out how to transport the USB back.
And if you can't afford the best, Logitech makes some nice clickers using their unified receiver. And I always find their unified receiver works better connecting to a PC than any other wireless thing that I've seen. But what do you think, Peter?
I would agree with you because that's exactly what I have right in front of me is one of the Logitech clickers that I find my speakers, again, I can't use the absolute best with the Boy Scouts, but it's fairly robust and people are comfortable pushing a button and there's a front and a back button on it. So it works very well.
Great. What's our next question?
Denise Kiernan from San Jose, California has a question about apps. She says, do you think Microsoft Designer will lure people back to PowerPoint from Canva?
I don't suspect it will lure people back from Canva. I think Canva, because it's a specialized product, people who've already gone all in on that product will stay there. For those who need what Canva does, it does a better job than Microsoft PowerPoint. However, it might prevent people from moving to Canva in the first place. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Microsoft Designer is an AI-based generator that can help design all sorts of different materials. It's going to be built into PowerPoint, and I think it was announced just last week or the week before. It's hard to tell how well it will do. Right now in PowerPoint, you can use design ideas, which will use AI based on to give you some common slide layouts. There's not very many and they're not super creative, but if it will look at your slide and see, oh, I have 2 pictures with 4 boxes and text. What are common ways that these are laid out well that look nice? And it's a nice starting point for making a new slide design if you're struggling otherwise. So I don't think it's probably going to replace it, but certainly it might help preserve Microsoft from having people leave that part of their customer base. What's our next question?
Chris Clark from Tempe says, at an education conference that I attended this week, a presenter handed out a 2x2-inch slip of paper with a QR code on it. He said, scan this and you'll have my slide deck on your phone. I thought it brilliant. Discuss.
Alex? QR codes are very powerful if used well. I use them for other events and we put them on the screen. So we put them up on the screen and just say, scan this QR code. You don't have to type anything in. One thing that I would avoid is people will get sensitive if you use Bitly or any kind of shortener to do this. And so if you're going to do a presentation, if you're doing it all the time, then put them up, it's worth basically going to Squarespace and setting up a URL and just having registering a URL that you're going to use for these things, that you're sending someone to a real web page. But you will have people who have security concerns about shorteners. And so what we do is we go in and I create usually it's like ask this.live or ask this.class. There's so many URLs and you can just make up whatever you want because they're not typing it in. So now what I do is I put the URL. If I own the URL, now I can make whatever I want. And I make a short URL that I can look at and immediately know, oh, I can just type that in, And so if for some reason all iPhones will see the QR code with their phone, some Android will see it with their phone. So to make sure that everybody can see it, I always put the QR code up and then I put the URL under it so someone could type it in if they had to. But you'll find that the uptick rate of a QR code over putting a URL in is about 10 times more effective for a QR code than if you put up a URL, the chances of someone actually typing that in, and a lot of it has to do, here's the funny thing, we talk to people about it. it's the autofill. The autofill on a URL is a disaster. And so when you try to type something in, it's very hard to get it to do the thing that you're trying to do because it keeps on trying to turn it back into English. The QR code bypasses all of that. And then the second one that I highly recommend is put that one up, but near the end, you can throw up a QR code that sends them to Rick Astley. It's always good. It's always good fun for get the whole room, never going to give you up.
It's a great prank. Chris.
Another advantage of this approach in this particular application was that fitting a brief slide deck onto my phone required discipline by the presenter to make the slides short, not much text, and nice visuals were attached to them that were very colorful. And it kind of the format forced him to follow the rules of best practice in having slides that weren't necessary to be incorporated into the oral presentation. We didn't even look at them during the presentation, but I had a record of the main points that he was trying to make, as well as contact information if I wanted to follow up with him later with questions. So it was a tour de force, both technically, for educators anyway, a tour de force for the technical side, but also for the content side. No paper, no fumbling with the projector, none of the classic problems of conference presentations with slide decks.
Yeah, great idea to have a whole bundle of giveaways through like a Dropbox folder or something. Alex?
Yeah, and the other thing that is great is you can put up a slide deck, and when you send it to them, the whole as was just mentioned, you can have a lot of different things. Like for instance, one of the things I've written a paper that is much more verbose, and it says everything I want. I build the slide deck for the presentation, but you never seem to see that again. The idea is for me to discuss those images. There's almost no text on my slide decks. But then there is a prose version of that slide deck that still has the slides from the slide deck, so it ties you back into that. So the pictures somewhere in the examples are there, like you would see a research paper. But then for academics especially, it's great to just have a 4-page paper that has the slides from the slide deck there. And you think about doing both of those at the same time. You give them a QR code, they download it, and everybody's much happier than they were before, and they stop taking notes, because you want people to stop taking notes as best you can, so they can be present.
Great. And one more time, back to Chris.
I just wanted to tell Alex especially that this presenter was from Seton Hill College or University, which is in the neighborhood that Alex grew up in. So
I've been to Seton Hill. That's good.
A little
place,
college, but classy operation.
Oh yeah.
Small world. Next question.
Dirk Brewer from Guatemala says, as a follow-up question to the PowerPoint and Cameo, is there a native option to output from either PowerPoint or Keynote into Zoom?
Most people will just use the screen share option in Zoom and have one full screen dedicated to the output. And there are some limitations to that. I think it probably increases your latency quite a bit. And that's the biggest difficulty with Cameo, is it increases your latency. And when you screen share in Zoom, Zoom prioritizes resolution over frame rate. And so it can also appear a little bit choppy for your viewers. Next question.
Chad Lafarge from Columbia, Missouri asks, when you align left multiple objects, does it align based on the leftmost first selected object or the last selected object?
That is a great question. I'll go back to my screen share. It aligns to the objects themselves. So if you're aligning left, it will use the leftmost side of the leftmost object, which is why I put those circles where they are, is because when I have them center aligned, and that causes the distribution aligns from the outermost, the topmost or bottommost if you're doing a vertical distribution, or left or rightmost if it's a horizontal distribution, but it does it based on the centers of the objects. And it's really helpful to understand when PowerPoint uses center points versus outside points. So for alignment, it always uses outside points. And then for distribution, it always uses the center point. It also comes into factor when you're getting into more advanced animations, which if we have time today, we'll cover. And if not, we'll cover it next week. But there is a tool called the Bright Slide add-in, and you can go to brightcarbon.com. They are the best PowerPoint learning resource that I know of. And they have an add-in. And what this does is it just creates some macros for PowerPoint for the most commonly used issues. And one of them is they have a separate alignment section here. And this allows you to align to a specific item instead of just the outmost in a group. I typically just use PowerPoint's built-in features, but this is something that I'm curious about learning more on. But you basically from here can select, I want these 3 items to align to the center point of item 4. I want them left aligned to the center point of item 4, for example. So the Bright Carbon add-on is really good. Specifically, they have a whole list of animation combinations, and you'll see those when I pulled up my slide earlier and it popped in those different bars, those colored bars. That was using one of these entrance effects. And what they are is they're just a preset list of entrance effects that include like a grow and a shrink and a fade, or a fade with a wipe down with a grow shrink. And they're just what you have a standard PowerPoint presentation at the end with standard animations, but they're really nice combinations of features that give PowerPoint the ability to feel a little bit more natural, like Keynote does. The difference between Keynote and PowerPoint is Keynote feels more natural, and you don't have to zhuzh it up to make the animations look good. And PowerPoint animations are incredibly mechanical. Like the wipes just sort of wipe in, and there's no bounce, there's no acceleration, and you can sometimes with effect options change that. But almost always, if you want your slides to stick out, it's helpful to have 2 animations combined back to back. And so I'll show you one quick example of that here on this slide, which I put in Discord this week. This is a motion path, and it's just a green rectangle moves up. And then at the peak of it, I have it jiggle using a teeter effect. And so it just makes this particular animation feel a little bit more organic than just having it to the top of the screen. So adding teeter effects or spins in PowerPoint animations can help them feel a little bit more natural, and is something that I would strongly encourage you guys to, and women, to look more into. Next, I'm going to go into the other main type of effects that you can use in PowerPoint if you want to get beyond the basics. And those first 3 effects that I use 70% of the time. These next 3 that I probably use 20% of the time. And if you want to highlight specific information on a slide, you can do that by changing the appearance of those objects. You can make something darker or lighter with a darker light effect. Or if you want to actually change the full color of it, you can use a color change effect to change the color of an object after you click. And lastly, and use this one with care, you can use a grow shrink animation to make one piece of your slide stick out a little bit from everything else by using size. And you can combine those things with, thinking if I have a grow shrink here. I don't have a grow shrink on this slide, but an example of where you can change, let's go with this one first. The others that you'll use, and these are ones that I would only use really, really sparingly as part of a different animation, and just to give a little bit of extra oomph to those. The teeter, spin, and motion path. The teeter causes your item to teeter back and forth about 10 degrees. And this is what I use on that slide with the schoolhouse, is I added the teeter to the rectangle after it had the motion path. You can use a spin to make something turn, and you can control how much you want it to turn. Or you can use a motion path to physically move the object. Motion paths are really tricky. And what I'll say about these 3 is you should only use them very, very sparingly and rarely, because they can easily become a distraction for your audience. And quickly, I'll show the motion path. You choose the start point is the green arrow, and the end point is the center point of the object. Again, the center point on animations is incredibly important, because with a motion path, you move your center point and it follows the line. For a motion path, you really only need to move something up, down, left, or right. There's almost never a reason to have it move any other direction, and it will look bad if you try to do it. for the spin animation. And one of the most important parts of animations is there are effect options. And you can open up your effect options from the animation pane, or from the animation tab. You click on the animation pane, and you can see all your animations, and you can select a specific animation. And here's somewhere where I think PowerPoint on PC is much better than PowerPoint on a Mac, is the effect options are easier to navigate. Because honestly, I'm not sure which effect I'm clicking on right now. This is the spin effect. So if I don't want it to do a full spin, I can do a quarter spin or half spin, or choose a certain number of degrees. So I can say 65 degrees. And now if I preview those, I'll see my teeter and my spin will turn just a little bit. And I'll show you how you can use a spin effect to make a dial, which most people don't know how to do in PowerPoint. So again, what you want to do is you almost always need to go into your effect options when you make an animation. From here, you can choose whether you have to click to make the animation trigger, or if you can have the animation trigger with the previous animation or after the previous animation. And that is how you get to advanced animations, is you combine the triggers and timing with the effects. When you go into the duration, this is how long the full animation takes to complete. And again, you can customize that. You can use decimal points as well to make stuff go fast, or to be very precise with it, as well as a delay. And so what I like to do sometimes is I'll start an animation that says, start with animation A, have a second animation trigger at the same time, but be delayed a little bit. So every time I click on the object, animation A happens, and then waits for a moment and animation B happens. And that's the example for that is right here on this slide. This slide, what I've done is I've selected this rocket, and I have the rocket do a 2-second teeter at first. And then 1.5 seconds into the teeter, I have a motion path that accelerates the rocket out of this slide. And so instead of just having a rocket ship talking about how great we are and how if you join us Saturday, you'll learn about animations and how to combine them, we can actually have a little animation, and I could have something hidden under that rocket if I wanted to reveal some statistic, for example. And so you can combine animations, and that's where your animations really stand out, is simple animations combined to make your slide deck look significantly better. Another combination that I have is this dial. And this dial actually just uses a spin animation to turn this dial, and then it has a teeter at the end of that. Underneath, I have a text box. And what this text box is, it has 3 lines of text. And so my text box is just going to move. So the bottom line of text is showing up right here. And I have blue rectangles that are masking above and below the text box. So when the text moves, it's just hiding underneath a rectangle. And I'll break it down when we get done with this. But what it looks like in the end result is I have a nice smooth turn of the dial with a teeter at the end of it, and then my percentage goes up. So breaking that down, if I were to change the color of my 2 masking blue boxes, change my shape format, and I have another rectangle right here. So you can see the text is just 2 lines of text, and it just literally moves up and down with a motion path. And then the dial, all it does is I have a spin on it. And if I go into my animation pane, I have a 65-degree spin that takes 1.5 seconds. Now the trick to spinning a dial especially is the center point. Because if I were to just create a new dial, for the sake of time, I'll just make it this shape, and then add a spin, of 15 degrees, it's not going to spin at the base of the dial. It's going to spin from the center point, which isn't great because the base turns. If you ever want to do a spinning item like on a clock or on a dial or anything like that, what you need to do is find the length of the item. And I can see that in shape format that this is a 3. I'm just going to make it 3 inches high exactly. And if I double the length of 3, what I can do is I can just add a rectangle. I'm going to draw a 6-inch rectangle. And I'm going to make my rectangle blue, and I'll send it to the back. Oh, didn't want to send it that far back. I line my rectangle under my triangle, select my 2 items, and I'll group them together. So now I have one object where the center point is the base of this triangle. And now when I add that animation, I'll put this right over here. So I have a 90% spin on it, and because it's a center point spin, it's looking like it's actually on the dial. And then the last piece to this particular animation is you take your rectangle and you just make it invisible with no fill and no line. So that's how you make something spin if you want it to spin with the base staying still. So you actually make it twice as long and have it spin from center. All right, let's finish the day out with some more questions. What's our next question?
Fascinating. Bob Sturdivant has the next question. He's from San Antonio, Texas. He says, what animations would you say are definite no-nos?
Peter?
Well, it kind of ties back to something Alex said earlier, where a lot of us will use slides with animation to make a point, but not necessarily be what we want to give to the client in my case, in the end, which is we want to give them a paper. So whatever you end up with, whatever animations you end up with, you need to have them end on something that you could hand out in a fixed format. I can't speak to animations. I mean, there are the obvious social animations you probably just want to stay away from, but but in terms of ones you should never do, don't do animations that you can't later hand to somebody complete and they understand what's going on.
Thanks, Peter. Real quick, Chris?
Don't use flashing lights. It triggers seizures in some people.
100% agreed. And I would just add to that, almost any other animation is probably a no-no. PowerPoint's really nice. They actually categorize the animations into basic, moderate, and exciting. Just don't use anything exciting and rarely use stuff in moderate, and you should be okay. Next question.
Comes from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He says, John or the panel, are there any unique PowerPoint animations that you do not find in Keynote or in Google Slides?
Honestly, I don't use any other animations than the ones that I showed today, so I'm not sure if there are or are not anything that's in PowerPoint that's not in Keynote. Everything I showed today, there's a version in Keynote. I will use a few more of the more exciting animations in Keynote because they just do they're a little more subtle and less mechanical. So I will typically be a little bit more aggressive in Keynote because it doesn't look quite as bad. And that is all of our questions for today. So again, thank you, panel, for joining us today to talk about PowerPoint, and thank you, producers, for the great questions. I hope everyone had a chance to learn something. And of course, we couldn't do it without everyone on the back end who is helping us make this a great show. So if anyone's interested in helping with the show, either as a panelist on Saturday or on the back end, you can sign up through our Discord. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see with the credits rolling here how much effort there is to make the show, and we hope you have a wonderful week. Next week, we'll come back and talk a little bit more about PowerPoint, taking a bad example and making it good.
You know, one of my prime rules was never use anything smaller than 32-point type, except one time I did it particularly small type because I wanted to display the difficulty in English idiomatic speech. When I was teaching a Chinese class, I used the word get, and I filled the screen with 14-point definitions of the word get. And it was only there long enough for somebody to say, oh, and then I killed that slide, and we had a conversation about the word for the rest of the time period. It was great.
Yeah, if you don't want people to read it, you can use that if it makes a point, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to boom, all that stuff. All that stuff? Wow.
All right. I guess we're supposed to whisper. Sorry.
Good
Thanks,
show.
everyone.
Good show.
Have a great day.
I have